Sophia will recount the narrative of how I regained control of my life and terminated the toxic influence of my husband, Xander. For confidentiality, I will use alternate names, as being a well-known attorney in my state necessitates anonymity. There's no reason to revisit how Xander and I initially fell in love, married, and subsequently divorced. The affection, it became clear, was never truly reciprocated. Xander's unfaithfulness made that exceedingly evident. The indicators were apparent: his increasing aloofness, prolonged periods away, and a growing number of business excursions. Despite my achievements as a legal professional, he belittled me as unsuccessful, solely because my earnings were less than his. One day, during yet another of his alleged trips, I decided to conduct an investigation. On his older laptop, I discovered a hidden Facebook profile, confirming my doubts. He was involved with someone else. The woman was strikingly beautiful, embodying the type of attractiveness he always insisted I did not possess. He had frequently disparaged my physical appearance, and now, confronted with undeniable proof of his deception, I felt the pain of every harsh comment he had ever directed at me. Enraged and devastated, I faced him the instant he came home. "Xander, are you unfaithful to me? I have evidence." He hardly reacted, instead exhaling as though relieved. "Sophia, you're simply not captivating anymore. You immerse yourself in trivial cases and ignore me. And let's be frank, you're not a supermodel." The words felt like a physical blow. "What are you implying, Xander? I have a challenging profession, and you were aware of that when we married. I haven't neglected you. You're the one who ceased coming home, who declined to communicate." Instead of displaying any regret, he intensified his blame, attributing his affair to me. His claims were unfounded, and I challenged him on it, but instead of offering a defense, his expression turned icy. Then, with surprising candor, he disclosed the truth. "Good that you discovered it. I no longer need to conceal my gorgeous girlfriend. She and I will have an idyllic existence together after I separate from you. Ultimately, I'll wed someone deserving of my status." The room appeared to sway. The man to whom I had dedicated years of my life stood before me, not only unapologetic, but also exultant, as though I had been merely an obstacle, a means to an end to someone he considered superior. Tears clouded my sight. "How can you utter such things? I supported you through everything. I respected my commitments." "It's irrelevant," he interrupted, his tone condescending. "I've surpassed you. I'm a thriving business proprietor now, and a woman with ordinary looks and an ostentatious law degree won't benefit me." I felt suffocated. "So that's it? You're genuinely divorcing me?" He sneered. "I'm not pondering it, Sophia. I've already determined it. I engaged a legal representative. You should commence packing." "I don't wish to see your unattractive face in my residence anymore." Hours later, as if to exacerbate the situation, Xander didn't even present the divorce documents himself. He dispatched them through a friend, a man who couldn't quite meet my gaze as he handed them over. I accepted the envelope, closed the door, and allowed the magnitude of everything to overwhelm me. I had squandered years on a callous, egocentric man, but as the tears streamed, something within me altered. I would not permit this to shatter me. I was more resilient than that. Then, Xander's friend inadvertently revealed something. He mentioned he might prolong this just to exhaust you. Initially, I didn't comprehend, and then it struck me. The prenuptial agreement. Xander had been so self-assured when we signed it, asserting that if he ever strayed, I'd be eligible for half of his enterprise. He had scoffed at the notion, vowing he'd never deceive me. Now he was attempting to stall, anticipating I'd withdraw without a struggle. Not a possibility. Determined, I contacted his attorney and arranged a consultation 2 days later. I packed my belongings and relocated to my childhood residence, the one under my name. Then I forwarded Xander a text message. I vacated, taken my ugly face and pretentious law degree with me. His reply arrived promptly. "Glad you're not creating a disturbance," followed by a self-satisfied comment regarding his lawyer's standing. I smirked, sensing a renewed determination within me. I'm not relinquishing my portion of the company. Henceforth, you'll engage with my legal representatives. His subsequent message dripped with conceit. I don't desire to converse with you. Remove your possessions from my dwelling. His words should have stung. Instead, they invigorated me. It was almost comical how little he comprehended who he was confronting. He had no inkling of what awaited him. A few days later, I met with his lawyer Jake at a coffee shop. The instant I entered, he paled. Initially, his hands trembled slightly, until recognition dawned, and he attempted to regain his composure. He had anticipated a faceless, powerless ex-wife. Instead, he encountered me. "Hello, Jake," I greeted smoothly. "Let's clarify something immediately. I am Xander's spouse." His Adam's apple moved. "Ma'am, The surnames differ because I retained my maiden name professionally," I elucidated, observing comprehension dawn on his face. Jake hesitated, then mumbled, "So, I presume you're here to obstruct the case? That's what my client insinuated." I leaned forward slightly, my voice resolute. "Your client is erroneous. He's the one endeavoring to postpone matters. But let me reassure you, this divorce will proceed according to my stipulations, and I will procure what is justifiably mine." Jake swallowed audibly. He had misjudged me. They all had. But this was merely the inception, and I fully intended to prevail. Jake fidgeted under my scrutiny, evidently ill at ease. I wasn't one to squander time with niceties. "You don't need to respond to that, Jake. I've known Xander for over 10 years. I wedded him, for goodness sake. I comprehend precisely what's transpiring within that dense cranium of his." I could discern the apprehension in his eyes, so I opted to provide him with some elucidation. "Since I am acquainted with you, and because this isn't equitable to you, I'll apprise you of the verity concerning this divorce." Jake blinked, his astonishment manifest. "What do you signify, ma'am?" I leaned in, my eyes keen. "Did your esteemed client happen to disclose that he was unfaithful to me?" Jake's countenance shifted. He was taken aback, and I could discern that the revelation impacted him more profoundly than he anticipated. His expression betrayed it, substantiating my suspicions. I won't feign, it's still somewhat painful to concede I'd been deceived. Conveying this to a colleague didn't sit comfortably, but I knew better than to allow my sentiments to surface. I was in command now. Jake, conversely, had no inkling of what was impending. "Oh no, I don't believe he's alluded to that," Jake stammered. "But he did assert you'd likely fabricate baseless allegations to discredit him." I couldn't refrain from smiling acrimoniously. "Poor fellow Jake, he's manipulating you. But hey, it might console you to learn that Xander esteems you as one of the finest legal practitioners in town." "Well, that's quite a commendation," Jake stated, his voice strained. "But I'll never attain your level, ma'am." His words were genuine, albeit slightly remorseful. "I wish he'd informed me his wife was an attorney. He solely mentioned you were employed at a firm." My laughter was incisive, a tad acerbic. Xander never acknowledged my accomplishments seriously. He's consistently endeavored to deprecate my work. But it was astute to sign a prenup. I'll concede myself credit for that. The term prenup struck Jake forcefully, his face drained of color. I could perceive the realization taking hold. Xander had conveniently omitted that, anticipating I'd forgotten about it, or that Jake wouldn't delve deeply enough to unearth it. Regrettably for him, I wasn't as gullible as he presumed. "There's a prenup?" Jake inquired, his voice subdued with astonishment. I wasn't cognizant of that. Do you possess substantiation, ma'am?" "Substantiation?" I queried, feigning astonishment. "Oh, I possess ample substantiation, Jake. I brought it all with me." I nonchalantly opened my handbag, retrieving the divorce documents, the photographs, the messages, everything I'd accumulated. Evidence of his betrayal, of his fabrications. Jake perused the documents, his expression transitioning from incredulity to resignation. He ultimately sighed, gazing up at me. "I perceive you've procured everything, ma'am. I had no inkling regarding any of this." I folded my arms, affording him a moment to assimilate. I surmised as much, and I comprehend how arduous it is when you're contending with an untrustworthy client. It's not as though you can regulate what he imparts to you. Jake nodded mutely. You're correct about that, ma'am. I believe that's all I require for now. I'll need to confer with my client prior to advancing with the case. Someone will be in contact, but it likely won't be me. I could sense his reluctance, and I didn't exert pressure. I expressed gratitude for his time and departed the coffee shop, feeling a serene resolve settle over me. I proceeded back to the office, assembling my own strategy for the divorce. Any residual melancholy I felt earlier had been supplanted by something considerably more potent: fury. And I was resolute in ensuring Xander endured the repercussions of his deeds. As anticipated, Xander didn't tarry long in contacting me. He dialed my number, notwithstanding his insistence that I remain distant from him. I couldn't help but chuckle slightly. He'd walked directly into this, and now he was floundering. I answered the call, and his voice came through, seething. "What the hell did you convey to my attorney, Sophia?" "Ah, Xander, so gratifying to hear from you after instructing me to abstain. What transpired with your legal representative? Cease playing diversions. Divulge what you articulated that induced him to resign today." I smiled, knowing precisely where this was leading. "Your lawyer resigned today? How regrettable. I suppose it's challenging when you're not forthright concerning your predicament, huh? You don't comprehend what you're asserting. You're a nonentity. I won't permit you to seize my family enterprise from me." I could sense his ire radiating through the phone. "Oh, I'd relish witnessing you endeavor, Xander. I'll engage a superior attorney, someone who can genuinely dismantle you. You'll come groveling back to me, imploring for clemency." His voice was imbued with a perilous kind of assurance. "Well, that sounds like a scheme, Xander. Best of luck with that. But here's a suggestion. Ensure your new legal representative is cognizant of the affair and the prenuptial agreement." Xander's reaction was expeditious. He terminated the call, the line going dead with an abrupt click. I guffawed, cognizant of how profoundly ensnared he was. He could tempt every legal practitioner in town, but it wouldn't alter a thing. No one was imprudent enough to confront someone with as much authority and sway as I possessed. I knew he would return. After all, it was merely a matter of time before he came crawling. And sure enough, I was correct. One morning, while I was preparing for work, I heard a knock on my door. It was an unusual hour for anyone to be visiting, so I opened it, perplexed. My breath hitched in my throat when I discerned who was standing there: my soon-to-be ex-husband, appearing fatigued and vanquished. Xander stood in my doorway. I didn't even flinch as I stepped aside to permit him entry. I wasn't in the mood for a spectacle, and I certainly wasn't going to allow him to humiliate me in front of anyone outside. Once inside, I crossed my arms and bestowed upon him a frigid gaze. "Make it swift, Xander. I don't have time to squander. We were supposed to converse through our legal representatives. So what is it? What are you even doing here?" He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, exasperation evident. "Yeah, regarding that. I haven't located a proficient divorce attorney yet." I couldn't help but emit a small, incredulous laugh. "Oh, that's regrettable, Xander. You better expedite matters, though. I hear your paramour is eagerly anticipating your nuptials." "I'm not concerned about her anymore," he mumbled, scarcely glancing at me. "Listen, Sophia, we need to converse. You've been subverting my legal representatives, impeding them from accepting my case. That's inequitable." The sheer audacity of him attributing blame to me for his predicament was almost excessive to endure. I emitted a curt, derisive laugh. "Oh, that's affluent. Permit me to rectify your minor misapprehension. I haven't subverted anything. It's your own imbecility that's causing things to disintegrate." "I don't comprehend. What did I even perpetrate?" he inquired, genuinely bewildered. "Should I apprise you of how you prevaricated to your legal representatives concerning the affair and the prenuptial agreement? That's sufficient to render them appearing as buffoons in court. What legal practitioner would willingly represent someone as untrustworthy as you? My name carries significance, Xander. You might perceive me as merely the spouse, but in this realm, I'm someone individuals heed seriously." He groaned. "I comprehend that now, Sophia. Yeah, I've endeavored being candid with legal practitioners, but none of them will accept me." "Well, that's what transpires when you endeavor to deceive everyone and contravene an ironclad prenup. You truly should have contemplated your affair, don't you concur?" I leaned in slightly. "But it's excessively belated now. The detriment is inflicted. No sane legal representative is going to espouse your cause. You'll be relinquishing half of your enterprise to me, Xander." I could practically discern the color draining from his countenance. His expression betrayed everything. He didn't desire to forfeit his cherished enterprise. That's why he procrastinated for so long, endeavoring to postpone the unavoidable. But no amount of entreaties or legal representatives was going to alter anything now. "Please, Sophia," he uttered, his voice quivering. "You don't have to do this. You can seize everything else. Just don't seize my enterprise." "Why not, Xander? You're the one who inserted a clause in the prenup that partitions the enterprise in the event of infidelity. Did you genuinely believe I'd merely depart without asserting what is justifiably mine?" He appeared almost panicked now, eyes wide with desperation. "It was an oversight, Sophia. You have to believe me. I'll sever ties with my paramour. Let's consign this to the past. Perhaps we can even endeavor anew. I vow I'll rectify it." His words were a pathetic endeavor to make amends, but I wasn't swayed. Instead, I couldn't help but laugh again uproariously. "Are you earnest presently, Xander? You desire to reconcile after everything? After everything you've perpetrated? You're merely apprehensive about the enterprise, aren't you?" "Sophia, we possess something exceptional. We were content. Let's just disregard this and commence anew. I'll do anything," he implored, his voice desperate. "There's no us remaining, Xander. Trust me. That woman you're so yearning to gratify is going to be long departed once she comprehends you're no longer affluent. She'll abandon you in the lurch, just like everyone else does when the funds are depleted. As for me, I'm ultimately liberated from this travesty of a marriage. I must express gratitude to you for manifesting your genuine disposition prior to us ever having progeny." I uttered nothing further after that. Xander persisted in imploring, his words growing more pitiable. But I remained unmoved. All I could contemplate was the innumerable nights I had expended, weeping myself to slumber due to his perfidy. Witnessing him grovel now solely served to satiate my yearning for retribution. I had triumphed. For 4 weeks he attempted to alter my resolve. I disregarded him entirely, declining to afford him any of my consideration. I had no interest in his melodrama. I was ultimately prepared to forsake that chapter behind and proceed. Ultimately, after weeks of futile endeavors, he was compelled to engage a legal representative and solicit a clean severance. He comprehended that if I conveyed the case to court, he'd confront public mortification, and there was no egress. The prenuptial agreement functioned in my favor, and my substantiation of his affair sealed the accord. Xander had no alternative but to relinquish half of the enterprise to me. Initially, he resisted, but after being presented with a buyout proposition that he couldn't afford, he had no recourse remaining. He undersigned everything over. Now you might be pondering how a prosperous businessman like Xander could be so impecunious. Well, it transpires he had expended everything he possessed on his paramour, who had long since ceased responding to his calls. She'd ascertained he wasn't affluent anymore, and now no one desired anything to do with her. Karma, it appeared, possessed a flawless method of functioning itself out. As for Xander, he vended his mansion to defray some of his obligations, and now resides in a modest condominium, a far cry from the opulent existence he had become accustomed to. He even attempted contacting me again, anticipating another opportunity to regain dominion of his enterprise. But that wasn't going to transpire. He was ensnared. Either persist as is, or endeavor to purchase me out, which appeared improbable given his circumstances. As for me, I'm flourishing. I designated someone to administer my portion of the enterprise, and thus far, everything has been more than I could solicit. I upgraded my lifestyle, procured a new mansion, And with my legal practice and enterprise proceeds, I'm ultimately inhabiting the existence I always merited. I couldn't be more elated. The divorce was my auspicious opportunity. I didn't merely escape, I prospered. Xander and his paramour, well, they can contend with the repercussions of their deeds. For me, this was the definitive recompense.